In a world filled with sharks, bears, and killer bees, one man is brave enough to stay indoors to bring you the latest in gaming, movie, and pop culture news. That man is Tom Awesome, and this is the Outside is Overrated podcast.
Hello and welcome to Outside is Overrated, a podcast about gaming and nerd pop culture. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your magnanimous host, Tom Solachik, and we've got a great show lined up for you. We have a World War II theme today as we are breaking down the board game Memoir 44 and HBO series Band of Brothers. Joining me for the discussion today are the ever-fancy Billy Parrott.
Good morning.
And the incomparable Mrs. OiO, Phoenix Sidlachik.
Hello.
Welcome back to the shows, guys. Billy, you haven't been on the main show since March 2023 when we broke down director Taika Waititi's feature films. What is your favorite piece of media that you've consumed in the last year, and why is it Bloodborne?
I'll never live that down. Bloodborne, yeah. So we recently all got together at my house, and I agreed if I could be a little bit inebriated, we'll just say, that I would play Bloodborne with you guys and have you walk me through it. And I gotta say, with everybody there, the experience was way more enjoyable than it was on my solo play of the game. So it was a heck of a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
So you're going to go top to bottom on Bloodborne and finish it, and it'll be your first FromSoft trophy?
I don't think so. I will do it again with you guys if that comes up ever. But I think my Bloodborne FromSoft days are going to be put to an end.
That's unfortunate. I'd just like to point out, or put it on record, that I was the one who was able to beat the cleric boss for us. It wasn't Brian. It wasn't Scott. They both had their shot, and they both failed. I walked in with less than a full bank of blood vials, and I was able to take down the cleric beast. So, suck on that, sure, Brian and Scott.
Yes. That was pretty good.
But in all seriousness, you've been playing other games, and you managed to get all the way through Baldur's Gate 3. What was that experience like for you?
I've got to say that I agree 100% with the fan base and with the awards that was the game of the year for me as well. As you know, you and I tried to put together a D&D campaign at some point, and that unfortunately didn't work. So being able to jump into Baldur's Gate 3 and kind of get a small taste of D&D, I know it doesn't follow the rules to a T, but it's pretty good at it. I'm wildly fascinated with that entire game and the Dungeons and Dragons lore now. I've picked up all the books. Like, I'm ready to dive head into this world because Baldur's Gate 3 just knocked it out of the park. That's probably one of my favorite games that I can say in like the top 10 now that I've played throughout my entire lifetime. So yeah, bravo to them. That was a fun game.
That's awesome. What was your final party composition? Who were the characters that you had with for the bulk of the adventure?
I had myself as a drow bard. I do like the bard class. That was a lot of fun. Ended up with Karlach, or Karlach, however you pronounce her name. And then I had Shadowheart, and then I was fooling around a little bit with Minx. I don't know if you got him at all in the game.
No Minx for me yet.
Yep. So Minx was fun to play. He's a great ranger, and he's just very funny at the same time. So the banter back and forth when you're walking around in the town. But yeah, that's what I ended up with, and that was a fun party to play with.
I'm still in the first act of the game, and I don't want to dive too deep because we are doing a show on Baldur's Gate later this year. But like, to me, Astarion is an absolute must-have. Like, how did you open chests? How did you disarm traps? Like, how did you just grab all the loot in this world without having Astarion at your side at all times?
That's what I've heard, that I made the mistake of not having him in my party enough because of that capability of his sneak and stuff like that. I wanted to try a different approach, just my own, and see how it went.
Do you call it the no-loot approach?
No-loot approach, yeah, that's true. I tried everything just in that way, and it worked out well for me, but I love the fact that this game is so ever-changing that I could go back and play, and it's going to be a completely different game altogether with my next choice, and I will 100% do that. I will play through this game again with a different party and different classes and whatnot.
Yeah, I suggest using Astarion.
I'm going to say yes, I will. I promise you.
And Phoenix, you're fascinated by human history. This is a World War II show that I know you had an interest in. What draws your particular interest to World War II?
I've always been fascinated with wars in general. I don't know, just how they happen, the complexity, the countries, who's fighting who and the reason. It started in high school with the Civil War, and then in college I had Mr. Hart, and he was a fantastic history teacher. I took his Civil War class because I love Civil War. And recommendation to anyone, read Killer Angels. It's probably one of the best sort of Civil War novels out there. And
Do we have that?
Yep, I own a copy. That's the only history book he wrote, Michael Sahara. His son wrote tons and tons of history novels. I think World War II ones, Civil War ones, he just flew off. He just wrote tons of them, I guess. But Mr. Hart really made me fall in love with learning about World War II. His class he dived deep, he brought in complexity, decisions, all different aspects, the Russian aspect, the Japanese aspect. We didn't just get like the American viewpoint. He really tried to paint a whole picture of every side's perspective of the war and the nuances of making decisions and the what ifs, that showed up. So I just really enjoyed what he brought and brought it alive. And there's a lot of what if questions in World War II. It's like, what if this happened instead of this? So it really piqued my interest. So
World War II is a big conflict. Is there a particular front or area of the war that is a particular interest to you?
The European front is always interesting because there's so many countries involved with it in ways. But the Japanese...
the Pacific
Front, thank you. I always felt they never gave that much coverage. It's not a lot of movies are done about it. And I was fascinated by Japanese culture. So it was fascinating to learn about them and why they did what they did. I mean, just if you ever read about what they did to China, it's just horrific. But it is a fascinating piece of history. If you ever can learn about the Pacific Front, it's amazing and it's horrific at the same time. So I was always more intrigued with that. So
I'm glad we're doing our show about Europe. It plays right into your interests. Yeah. And Billy, where did your interest in World War II and war in general come from?
Yeah, so my father watched all of those movies, read books on it and everything. We don't come from a military family background. I'll discuss that later on. But, both my grandfathers were in Korea. So no ties to World War II or anything in my family. But my dad just loved watching old war movies, newer war movies and stuff. And I would watch them with him. You know what I mean? So the interest was from a very young age. So that's kind of where I started and just fell in love with them and watch as many as I can to this day.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to tapping into your knowledge of World War II and war cinema. Before we start on our main topics today, let's say thank you to our sponsor, Premier Health. Check out their website at premierhealthmn.com. That's premierhealthmn.com. If you enjoy our content, please support Outside is Overrated on Patreon. It is a crowdfunding platform that helps pay for all the media that we consume and all the expenses that go along with doing a podcast. And you can contribute as little as $2 a month to support the show. That's patreon.com/OiO. You can also follow us all on social. Email the show at overratedpod@gmail.com. That's overratedpod@gmail.com. You can follow me at TomSidlacicOiO on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow Phoenix at PhoenixSidlacicOiO on Instagram. Show up at Billy's doorstep and knock on the door, or follow the show at Facebook.com/OutsideIsOverrated. We're going to start our discussion today on the board game Memoir 44. Memoir 44 is a historical board game where players face off in stylized battles of some of the most famous battles of World War II, including Omaha Beach, Pegasus Bridge, Operation Cobra, and the Ardennes. I didn't think that Cobra would be the first word that I mispronounced on the podcast. Memoir 44 includes 16 different battle scenarios. The game features a double-sided hex game board for both beach landings and countryside combat. Each scenario mimics the historical terrain, troop placement, and objectives of each army. Players deploy troops through command and tactic cards, applying the unique skills of their units, whether it's infantry, tanks, or artillery. On your turn, you will play a card that dictates how many units you can activate and which section of the board you activate them in. Memoir 44 was originally released in 2004. It was designed by Richard Borg, and it currently has a Board Game Geek rating of 7.5. Now, Billy, am I correct in assuming that you've never played a tabletop war game before?
You know, unless you count Stratego, I always get that name incorrect. I played that with my dad back in the day, so I don't know if that's like a war game, but this would be the first official war game, yes.
So you walk into our basement, you see this board set up with 100 little minifigures on it, hexes all over the place, different pieces, different hexes with terrain, cards with various rules lying about the board. What was your first thought when you walked in and saw this game laid out?
I guess my first thought was like, oh, it's in like hexagons, kind of like Settlers of Catan was, right? So that was my first pop-up. I was like, oh, how is this going to play out? It's going to be interesting. And then seeing you guys go through the pamphlet they give you so you can perfectly align all the pieces to accurately, or at least accurately in quotes, place the troops where they were in that particular battle was really cool to look at. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was definitely like one where the three of us only played 2 games together. So it's definitely one that I want to continue playing with you guys, because I think different scenarios and what would happen with them would be a really interesting thing to see.
Visually, the game could be a little overwhelming when you first walk in. You control anywhere between 8 and 15 units, and each unit has 2 to 4 figures on it. So as the game plays out, each time a unit gets hit, you remove one of the figures, and when the last figure is removed, your opponent claims it as a medal. So you walk in, and there are just tons of these figures to move around the map. Phoenix, your only previous experience with Memoir 44 was witnessing me play massive 6-player affairs where each of Casey's turns took at least an hour. You tried very subtly. To swap this game out of this episode multiple times, but I dug into my foxhole. What surprised you about your experience with Memoir 44?
Well, let me just say, I didn't realize you caught on to me trying to subtly hint, like, well, there's this card game, Undaunted. Let's play this instead. Or
we could get Black Orchestra.
Black Orchestra.
Yeah, no, you tried for months, and I just said, no, we're going to do Memoir.
Well, Black Orchestra, it's a cooperative game. We all work together to kill Hitler. But no, you dug in hard, and you're like, you're playing this game.
We've owned it for a long time, and I did the show to make you play it. It's kind of like making Casey watch Firefly.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, I think my turn, Casey is the same.
My turn, Casey, I guess.
And Casey, guess what's coming your way?
I have to be honest. I loved it. Watching you guys play it, it went for like half a day, and you guys were like hemming and hawing. There's so many figures. There were so many you guys, I don't know, it just looked so overwhelming watching you guys play, and it just felt like you had to know a lot of tactical know-hows that I didn't know if it came out of the rule book and stuff. I didn't realize how, I don't want to say it's simple, but how easy it is to pick it up, because it's drawing cards, looking at the cards, playing the card, and rolling the dice, and that's the end of your turn. And I was surprised in one game. I fell in love with it. It was very easy for me to pick up and play together, and I'm really enjoying it as a 2-player game. So
this game was designed as a 2-player game.
Yes,
it's intended as a 2-player game. And my friends Jake and Pat fell in love with Memoir 44 early on, and there are rules that adapted for larger groups. And typically, when I play with them, we're in a group of 4 to 6, and you play with at least 2 boards. Mm-hmm. You play with 2 boards. Everyone's commanding multiple sections of that board. You're sharing your command cards. And a lot of the time is spent arguing about who gets what card for their section, because everyone has their own stuff that they're trying to achieve.
See, yeah, I don't, after playing it between you and I don't think you played it 2-player before, but...
No, I never had.
It's like, I can't see how you could share your cards with 2 or 3 other people, because then it's like, well, I can see a strategy here is going to work better at this time. Please let me lay my card, because you don't know what the other side has, and so things can change. I can't see having multiple people and trying to get your turn to lay a card if they want to do theirs. So I think it's a great 2-player game.
Yeah, there's a lot of compromise with bigger groups.
Yes.
Billy, what surprised you about your experience with Memoir 44?
I mean, really, it's that type of game that you can play where, like, one decision could completely just destroy your entire unit. You know what I mean? Like, and that happened playing against Phoenix a couple of times, you'd be like, lay a card down, and you're like, this is going to be a great strategy. And then she goes, nope, and then throws down her card, and you completely get demolished. I mean, it's crazy with the two different. Did we do 2 battles? Is that right? Am I correct?
Yep, you two played 2 battles against each other, playing both, each taking a turn as both the Axis and the Allies.
That's right. Yep. And then we did one where it was just like all infantry with just like your barbed wire and sandbags and stuff like that. And then the next time I came over, we did one with artillery as well.
Yep, the first scenario, the Axis is dug in, and the Allies are basically advancing towards them. It's a very straightforward campaign where mainly you're just moving infantry troops and rolling dice, and it's a great kind of onboarding scenario for the campaign. Then the next time you came over, we jumped further back in the campaign book, and we did the Liberation of Paris, where the Axis are once again dug in. There's 2 main fronts that they're on, but both sides have a lot more units to work with. I believe there's tanks, artillery, and infantry. All the core units in the game are in that. So how did the experience grow for you, Billy, from the first campaign where you're just moving infantry and rolling combat dice to having the full suite of tools at your disposal?
I mean, it's a really big game changer at that point when you start adding artillery or when you start adding stuff like that into it. I mean, just they can shoot farther, so you really have to play a lot better defensively than if you're infantry, where you're just like, push them all, and you can try to get it as quickly as possible. So yeah, with those tanks, man, that really was a huge game changer.
And then after that, we had Billy try Sword Beach with the bunkers, because that's a whole different experience.
That's right.
Trying to
that was a huge one.
Try to have him experience the scenario of moving your troops out of the ocean onto the beach, but then you had to deal with the bunkers with the artillery, because that's whole terrain is also very different to experience. So
before we dive too deep into the scenarios, Billy, how long did it take for you to feel comfortable with the basic mechanics of just moving your units? Infantry can move 1 or 2 spaces. If they move 1, they can battle. If they move 2, they cannot. Tanks can move up to 3 spaces and can battle up to 3 spaces away no matter what they do. And there's different nuances for all of these pieces. How long did it take for you to feel comfortable just with the basic actions of the different unit types?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to take a little bit more time for me, honestly, because I do remember, even in the last battles that we were doing when we did the final playthrough with me and you guys, I was still asking you, oh, okay, so because I did this action and because Phoenix is here, if I try to go to shoot for that and you're like, nope, you should probably look into doing this. So it was a lot of, not hand holding. I don't want to make it sound like, we're feeble and don't know what we're doing with the game or anything like that. The rules are pretty simple. It's just remembering, like, because of this terrain, because of this unit, because of this artillery, or because of this, you're going to -1 die or -2 die or add die and stuff. So it takes a little bit of thought. So I think, a couple more games would probably get me into the good rhythm of knowing, like, if I do this, I'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. The basic rules are very simple. You play a card, you activate that many units, and you roll your combat dice. Phoenix, how long did it take for you to feel comfortable playing this game?
Overall, I think 1 to 2 games. But again, even last night, just trying to remember the terrain, because with your little infantry troops, they can shoot into a forest a little bit better than the tanks can. And so it's just remembering how many hexes to the forest minus the forest. Is the tanks going to be a better option versus the infantry because of the minus die piece? But once you add in rivers and bridges, which we did, those can add more complexity, and we're just trying to get more of a handle of that because that was a little newer last night for us. So
yeah, do you think the terrain was the hardest part to the nuance of this game?
I think yes, because the infantry, the artillery, the tanks, you can get a handle of those pretty easily. Some of the cards you kind of have to read very carefully on how to utilize them. You have your basic cards, which are easy, move 2 units or move 3 units, but they have specialty cards like artillery assault, which allows you to have more dice or move something a little further. But I think the terrain is the trickiest part, is trying to remember the terrain, because some rivers you can shoot over, some rivers you can't. So like last night, we had a river that was too big to shoot across, so I couldn't shoot across. with my infantry, but also my tanks were just blocked in behind this river, and I couldn't get them out because I wasn't drawing the correct cards to move them enough hexes to get them out behind the river. So the terrain, I think, adds a lot to the experience of the board game because it feels like there's obstacles in your way. There's things that you have to overcome, you know.
And there's a lot of different types of terrain in this game. There are hills, there are forests, there are hedgerows, there are towns, there are bunkers, and each of those have slightly different rules. Generally, tanks shoot poorly into all of those things, and infantry shoots a little bit better. But they're spread across the map, and there's just... They try to make it easy. There's reference cards for each one, and when you're playing a game with hills, you just pull out the hills reference card and have it next to the board if you're playing with forest. But when you stack 4 different types of terrain in one map, and sometimes there's special rules, like you mentioned the river that we couldn't shoot over last night. There's another campaign that we played. There's a giant hill, which you can go down the hill towards the Axis side, but you cannot go backwards on the Allies side. So if the Allies get pushed against that hill and you roll a retreat, they're losing units.
Yeah, it's impassable. So... You know, the map in the guidebook, rule book, when you open it, they will have little indicators, like the one scenario, the impassable hills. It's like, I can't go up this hill. And so you have to remember that. You have to go around the sides. So they've done an excellent job of making things change with every battle and trying to make it look similar to the battles in the war. But yeah, the terrain really adds a complex piece to the game, which is nice because you don't want it to be the same over and over again. So,
and speaking of not being the same over and over again, you're drawing different cards every game. You're at the whims of your dice for all of your attack rolls. Something that we debated quite a bit, Phoenix, was card luck and dice luck in this game. Does card luck and dice luck emulate real warfare, or does the randomness detract from the experience?
I think it gives you a little bit more sense of how things can happen in time with war, because yes, you can have a grand plan. You know, I've never been in the military. I don't know how everything works, but I know they have battle plans. I know they try to plan stuff, but once things start to happen, I'm sure there's a lot of reactionary decisions made at when things are happening. Like we see in Band of Brothers at the town of Foy, that he was given a battle plan, he was supposed to follow it, and then all of a sudden
he crumbles,
and then they have to change. So I feel like the cards and the die does help make you think on your feet, which probably they had to do all the time. So I think it helps make it feel more like you're in the battle. So,
and going back to the campaign we played last night, I'm sure you had a plan, and I was playing as the Axis the first time, and I rolled all my tanks onto this bridge, which was in my center unit, and then I ran out of center cards. So whatever your plan was, you had these tanks just sitting ducks in the middle of the map, surrounded by your units that I couldn't activate anymore. I don't know what your original plan was, but it seemed like you pivoted pretty effectively to massacre all of my tanks on the bridge.
I did. Last night's scenario was Operation... can't pronounce it. Lutzen, was it that?
Was
one?
it Lutich?
Lutich?
No, that was an earlier one.
Okay.
I think that was the Impassable Hill.
Oh, okay. Well,
no, St. Vith was the Impassable Hill.
This one, you know, the access is behind a town and a huge river, and there's one tiny little bridge to get across. And the allies are all spread across and with artillery, and so it really sucks when you don't have center cards to move the tanks to be able to get them across the bridge, which you ran into. You never drew center cards.
Yeah, I had one center card and I used it to get my tanks onto the bridge, but my dumb mistake was all my other cards were like in the left section, and I should have known that I wasn't going to be able to move those units again, and I just left them exposed there, and it gave you an easy victory, probably the easiest victory that we had in this game.
And then when I played the Access, you know, I had some center cards, but then all of a sudden I'm drawing all left cards. And once you move your tanks out of the left side of the board into the center, it does you no good because these left cards are a mute point. So you really have to be kind of strategic to keep some of your troops or tanks, if you can, in the left and the right side of the board, because you never know if you're going to draw all center cards or just side cards, left side cards. So last night just was very interesting for us because of the terrain was difficult with the river and us not drawing a lot of cards that we needed. But then you tried to attack my one little guy with how many die?
I had 10 dice to try to roll one soldier, which is at least a 2 and 6 chance, so 1 and 3, a 33% chance. I rolled 10 die, and I hit him once.
Just once. It's like, dice, I think, play a big role, too, because I sucked at rolling last night, too, because the flags, they can help, but also they can hinder you, because the troops retreat back when there's a flag. But yeah, card luck and dice luck, I think, really help this game to shine because there's a lot of nuances that you have to really work with. So,
and Billy, I'll turn to you. Our mutual friend Scott is a game designer, and he has very strong feelings towards randomness in game design. Do you feel like the card luck and dice luck added to the experience, or do you think that it detracted?
I think what Phoenix was getting to with the randomness of how war can go absolutely will tie into like what you can roll, what cards you have. The only thing that makes me laugh is like because of you can only move your patrols or your units or your tanks only if you have that card. Just makes me picture a scenario where Tom is in charge of a tank unit and they're on a bridge and he tells his commanding officer that he can't move them because he doesn't have any center cards to move them. So I guess, if you look into it that much and take yourself away from the game.
Oh God, I'm essentially Foy. I just crumbled. I got in the middle and everything fell apart, man. And I just sat down.
Yes, you did.
Spears, where were you?
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, sure, it does the absolute randomness of battle because you can be so prepared as much as you want and something can turn on a dime and it completely just takes you, just derails your entire team. But not having the cards to move your troops X, Y, and Z that's the little unrealistic part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, as a communications breakdown, I also left those units with no retreat. Fans of the game will know that you always have to account for people rolling flags. You always need to be able to move your units back. And it was just very poor planning on my part. Not only were they exposed, they also had no retreat, so Phoenix just massacred them.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I noticed when you were playing this game, Phoenix, you were much more aggressive in Memoir 44 than you tend to be in anything other than like Diablo 3 and Diablo 4. So like, how did you measure aggressiveness versus a more conservative approach in this game?
Oh, really? Because me with Diablo 4, I have to get right in the middle and just fight. So, but generally, typically, when I first started playing board games with you, I was a little insecure. It has taken me time to just try to let go of my insecurities and just, okay, don't deep think this, just try to play. And so this game has allowed me to really get a little more confident and just, okay, we'll just try this. I mean, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I can't think I have to do everything perfect, I guess I always run into. But, I mean, majority you won most of the games that we played,
I won the majority of the early games. I would say it was pretty even once you kind of got your feet wet. And we played, I think, 10 scenarios out of the 16 that are in the box. Like we played almost every night for 3 weeks.
Yes. So, yeah, after a while, it's trying to be more strategic and, thinking about stuff. But it's very hard to be strategic because it's like, okay, I am going to try think 3 steps ahead, but the problem is I don't know what cards you have. And, so I really feel like you can't be that strategic. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just try being a little more aggressive and just, I have this card, let's just use this card. What's the point of saving it if I can't use it later? Like counterattacks. I would assume a lot of people, it's a gray card that allows you to counter-attack a card that was played by your opponent. So
if I just played a card that allows me to attack with all units in the middle, or if I had played their finest hour, which allows me to activate multiple units, or armor assaulter, it basically copies whatever card I just played.
Yeah. And so I could see people saving that to play against a specialty card like finest hour, but there was moments where it's like, okay, I don't have any cards for the right side. He just played a card for the right side, so I'm just going to use the counterattack so that I can at least activate these troops and shoot against you, because I don't have any cards for the right side. So I just thought I would try going more aggressive and seeing what happens. So
yeah, well, it worked out well. You had a lot of... It seemed like you mastered the nuance of this game really well. And Billy, I'll turn to you again. I noticed when you were playing, you tended to really push units forward and take an aggressive attacking formation. One of the core mechanics in this game is avoiding having units eradicated. If I can take all 4 of your figures off of your infantry unit, I claim that as a medal, and I'm one step closer to winning. Essentially, you win by clearing out so many of your opponent's units. Did you have any trouble balancing aggression in this game?
All the time. Yeah, absolutely. Typically on other games, I'm more of a defensive player. I'm not a run and gun kind of guy. But with this one, there are situations where that actually is to your advantage. If you can do it well, you can take out a unit pretty quickly and get a medal for that. You know what I mean? And what did you need? 5? Is that correct? To win
it depends on the scenario. It can range from 4 to 6.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's, you got all the other medals at the back side of the opponent's board. You know what I mean? And so sometimes the best strategy is just take out as many people as you can, and you're going to just win that way. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you do expose yourself at the, so it really depends on the battle. And again, it's hard for me to give you like a definitive answer on it because I only did it twice. So I think I could give you a better answer once I do play again with you guys and go through different wars and try to understand it a little bit more. But yeah, as far as what we did do, more aggressive side for me, just because Phoenix was really good and she wiped out a lot of my stuff. So,
And
I think I won one. So I'm happy with
yeah, I think you did. When we first started playing with the infantry, the troops can only move a certain way, and it does become more interesting. I just want to talk about the tanks, because the tanks, they can move 3 hexes and shoot 3 die, 3 hexes out. And even though the terrain can be difficult for them to shoot into because of the less die, but like he was talking about with the medals, I remember the one time we were playing, there was medals on the backboard in the cities, and you just took your tanks and you plowed through my infantry, and then you had a whole bunch of your tanks on the backboard shooting behind me. And so tanks, I think, is another little piece that can make it very interesting how you utilize the tanks, because you can blow through barbed wire and it doesn't slow you down. Where with infantry troops, you can't move after.
If infantry moves into barbed wire, they have to stop, and they can either shoot out at a penalty or they can clear that barbed wire for the rest of the game. I like the mobility of the tanks. Tanks are awesome if you can catch units out in the open.
Yeah.
If someone jumps into a town, jumps into a forest, your tanks are much less effective. But if you can charge past the line, find units out in the open, you can shoot. If you make them retreat or eliminate a unit, you can move into their space and shoot again.
Yes,
so you could potentially get 6 dice from 1 tank unit per turn, which is really beneficial.
Yeah, it was hard for me to remember that, because with the tanks, you can shoot at a troops. If you wipe them out, they can overrun and take that space and shoot again. Where the infantry, they can take the space, but they can't shoot. So it's nice to have different things that have different types of movement. Infantry act a certain way, tanks act another way. Artillery, you can move them, but they can only move 1 hex and they can't shoot. So you have to be very strategic on how you use your artillery too, because...
Yeah, last night you took an aggressive approach with artillery. You had some artillery barricaded towards the back end of the map, and you decided to push it forward, which took them out of cover, left them exposed. That's why I rushed my tanks up. I thought maybe it was a little aggressive, but I wanted to give you the freedom to try that tactic without the commentary, and it worked out awesome for you.
Yep, I wiped out your tanks.
Yeah, and everyone else. I only got 1 medal that game.
If I could, I think that's the cool thing about this game at the same time, too, is the fact that you both could probably go back and play that exact same battle that you did last night. And because of the randomness of the die and not drawing all the cards that you did last night, you're going to have a completely different outcome than you did. You know what I mean? So I do got to give it up to the game for having that, for sure.
I agree. Yeah, that's what I really enjoy, because it's nice to have a board game that we can take out and replay without it being the same. So it is, like Billy was saying, it is nice to have the ability to play a scenario over and over again. It's not going to be the same. So
yeah, I don't think we're going to repeat that scenario from last night too many times. Well, Billy, how well does Memoir 44 capture the aesthetic and atmosphere of World War II battles? Did you feel immersed in the European campaign as we played?
I thought this was kind of a difficult question. Due to the fact that I'm not familiar with the particular battles themselves, just the wars overall and everything, it's tough. It definitely does show like how each side can and was overcome with like their opposition and stuff so quickly, and how easily you can be just completely destroyed or destroy the other side. So yeah, this was more of a difficult question. And again, as we're all playing as civilians who are not soldiers and have never been in war, it's hard for me to speak on behalf of anybody who has. So did it show tactics and how battles can go? Yes. Can I say that it like immersed me in the European campaign? No, not really. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one for me to answer.
I'm in a very similar boat. All of the detail outside of like Omaha Beach is just wasted on me. We could have been fighting on the moon for all I knew.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, I did appreciate that each scenario has a synopsis of what really happened. Like it tells a little bit about the setup, how they got there, and what actually played out. And then it says, well, here you go. Roll your dice.
Yeah, I agree with you guys too. I mean, not knowing the battles, each details, not being a historian who knows every little piece of everything about World War II, it gives you a little taste, But yeah, it's like you guys say, I agree. You can't really feel immersed, I guess, in it. So,
well, do you feel like you learn more about World War II through playing it? Because to me, like I'm focused on the game. It's like, all right, this scenario, I have tanks. Cool. Like I don't really connect that with the historical situation at St. Vith at the Pegasus Bridge.
I guess I agree too. I mean, you get the little tidbit about the history, but that's, I agree with you on that. So,
well, for this show, we played many of the scenarios from the base game. They start relatively simply with Axis forces dug in and the Allies charging at them. By the end, you're commanding up to 15 different units, including paratroopers, special units, tanks, and artillery. Phoenix, across all of the scenarios that we played, which ones stood out with you?
We sort of talked about them already, but Sword Beach, D-Day, just getting a little, experiencing coming off the ocean onto the beach, dealing with the bunkers, sort of seeing what their battle was like.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting, this game has a rule for units moving out of the ocean onto the beach. They can only move 2 spaces, which for infantry is as far as they can move anyways in the game. But for your tanks, which you can usually move 3, it feels incredibly limiting. So you have all these troops that start in the ocean. If they're on the back tile of the ocean, they can only move up 1. And then their next turn, you can only move those maximum of 2 spaces. And Sword Beach and Omaha Beach, they both have these mechanics where the Allies have to try to get their units just up onto the beach and into play. And I thought that was a really interesting aspect of the beach landing scenarios.
Yeah, because with the Allies, if you're playing the Allies, you are spending a lot of movement to try to get them out of the ocean onto the beach, because you can only move 1 hex with any of them. But once you get on the beach, you can start pushing them forward quicker. So it's like you really got to try to get your men out of the ocean. So it was quite interesting to play that scenario and deal with the terrain of that. I mean, I don't know what Billy thought of the whole D-Day Sword Beach scenario.
That was difficult, especially being in the water. Yeah. I mean, that did kind of replicate what a lot of the U.S. soldiers did have to deal with when they were storming the beach, is like, you still have to get onto the beach while you're being fired upon. So yeah, my troops and everything, they definitely had a difficult time getting out of that water. So yeah, going back to what you guys were saying previously, the terrain plays such a huge part in this game, and it can really, really screw you up if you're not careful with your next moves.
Yeah.
Sticking on Sword Beach for a little bit. Phoenix, it was your first mission with ample tanks. What was that like? First time playing with that extended movement and shooting? Because we've talked about tanks a little bit and their utility. How long did it take for you to feel like you really knew how to use your tanks well?
I think it took a couple different game scenarios to really get a handle of them and their utility. Because with Sword Beach, you have barbed wire, but you also have the
hedgerows.
Not the hedgerows.
Hedgehogs.
Tanks can just plow through barbed wire and remove it so you can push your infantry through. But the hedgehogs, they cannot go in those hexes with them. So you have to try to meander through this sort of maze to try to get them up the hill and through if you can without the artillery.
And that's made even more challenging because you can't move through your other troops. So if you have infantry in front of all your tanks, can't move through them. You gotta play a card, move that infantry out of the way, and then you can zoom with your tanks. And it gets to be a very challenging puzzle just trying to get your tanks into the position where they can wreak maximum havoc.
That is true.
One of the scenarios that I liked was Point du Hoc, which I believe is another beach landing. The Axis is in a series of bunkers across the map, and somewhere they have their big guns hidden. Thematically, the Axis have big guns, and the Allies are out to destroy them. And they're in some apple trees up in the top corner of the map. And if you can get an ally up onto that hex, they drop a grenade in the gun, you claim that medal, and you're one step closer to winning. When you played as the Allies on that one, I was able to massacre all your units before you got up there. But when I was playing as the Allies, I was able to sneak, I think, 1 or 2 units up there, and I was able to claim those 2 medals, and it was the difference between victory and defeat.
Yeah, that's the one where you snuck up your tanks up behind me and just boop, 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 picked up the medals from the towns. But
And generally, a lot of times in Memoir 44, there will be a medal for claiming a town. And if you move a troop onto that town, you get that medal. And if you can get to the number of medals you need for victory, you win. Mm-hmm. But if that unit either moves or is eradicated, you lose that medal. And it goes back on the town until you move back there. In this specific campaign, Point du Hoc, you keep those medals forever. So I knew that I was probably going to lose that unit that I was sending up there, but it was worth it to potentially steal 2 victory points.
That's true, yeah.
Another campaign that you liked, Phoenix, St. Vith. There was an impassable hill between the Allies and their reinforcements. There's lots of variables with the terrain, lots of different units in play, and it kind of came down to what cards you draw and how hot you roll. What stood out about that campaign for you, or did I just steal your punchline?
Well, basically, no, what you said is pretty much what I liked about it, but playing the Ally or the Axis, I enjoyed it because each side had to attack it differently. You had such different terrain, hedgerows, hills that you can't climb, forest. And so just the variability of all the terrain just made it very interesting and made you think a little harder and try to place your cards a little bit more strategically versus the one last night with the river. It's just the river one was not.
The river one was hard. There's a moment in St. Vith that stands out to me. When I was playing as the Allies, I was able to roll my reinforcements around that impassable hill and get them into play. But we spent most of the game battling over a couple small patches of woods.
Yes.
Because I had a lot of tanks, and if your units got into the woods, it was very difficult for my tanks to hit them. So I tried very hard to push my units up into those woods, and we kept battling there, retreating, taking ground, and it was very much area control for that cover for my tanks. And I thought that was a really interesting moment out of all the scenarios that we played.
Yeah, it was a lot of back and forth. You know, you took this hex, but then I shoot scare you away from that hex, so I take that hex. So it was a lot of back and forth between the terrain. So
yeah, and I thought that moment in that scenario was really good. And I was 1 die away from beating you in that campaign. I was 1 die. I think I had 3 die with one of my units attacking your tanks, and I was 1 hit away, and you wound up stealing the victory.
Yeah.
I wrote it in all caps in here to make sure that I remembered bringing up
the
that
1 die.
1 die. Friend of the show, Jake R. asked us an interesting question about Memoir 44 on Patreon. Jake asked if any of us had family who served in World War II, and if so, does playing a Memoir 44 scenario that they fought in, of a battle that they fought in, does that sound exciting or morbid?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. My grandfathers were both in Korea, so nobody in my family served in World War II. So it's difficult for me to answer that question. I think more or less movies and books depict it a heck of a lot better than a board game would. I don't know. That's my own personal opinion. But that's a really good question. I like that one. But yeah, personally, for me, since nobody served in World War II, I can't really answer that question.
Yeah, I had a few family members. My dad's side, his father actually, he was not allowed to go because he worked at a tool and dime factory, and his job was viewed as important, so he didn't go over. But Nana, my grandma, her three brothers, Virgil, Vernie, and Red. Red was in the Pacific, Vernie was a cook on a battleship, and I believe Virgil was on the European front, but all three came back. I never was around them. I never saw them that much, so I never really heard any of their stories. I don't know if they talk to their kids that much, so I don't know how much has been passed down from their experience to their families. But I guess the most interesting is my mom. Her mom went over to Europe after the war was done on a program, met her husband in Holland, and he came back over. He was a high schooler at the time when Holland was invaded during the war. He passed messages to farm for the resistance. They actually made their bikes look broken. They figured out internal welding so that it looked broken, but it was solid.
And why did they need to look broken?
Because they didn't want the German soldiers to steal them. But I just learned a fascinating thing about him. He was actually had to report to the Eastern Front. The Germans came with an order, told me he had to report to the Eastern Front. And I guess, according to my mom, he memorized the timetables of the train, escaped with a friend back to Hague, and his mom had to hide him in the attic, and they would hang a rug over the door, but one time they forgot to put it up, and the German soldiers came and found the door. They went in. He's hiding behind a bag of coal, and I guess they were stabbing it with their bayonets, but they missed him, so he lucked out on that. And I guess he also saw his cousin shot in front of him because she had a message. So he didn't talk about it much, so my mom has only a few little stories. He died when she was young. I think she was about 10. But so it's unfortunate. A lot of his experience and his history about World War II has been kind of lost. And
one of the things we've reflected on getting ready for this show is just how much of history is lost because the people that lived it are no longer with us, and they didn't necessarily pass it down. Like, it's unfortunate that not everybody journaled about it.
It's a hard thing to talk about. Even my uncle, my dad's brother, he was a medic in Vietnam War, and he still to this day can't talk about it. He thought being a medic would be a breeze, an easy job, but I think he said it was one of the worst things he could have chosen. But he still to this day, he won't really talk about his experience at all. So it's hard. And watching the men talk about on Band of Brothers, just how difficult it was for them to talk about. So hopefully a lot of things have been recorded, but yeah, personal history with my family, I don't know how much is lost because they had a hard time talking about it. So
sure. And to come back to the spirit of Jake's question, if we had a personal connection to the war, do you think it would be exciting to play a battle that you had a personal connection to, or would it be a more morbid experience?
Maybe it'd be a little morbid if I knew all the nuances, but I don't know. Because it's so, you're not really immersed in the game. It's just more like tactical, black and white type looking at it, I guess. And being at this age, we're kind of far removed from it. We don't have the personal,
Well, say,
yeah, sure.
Let's adapt it to a more recent time. If Memoir 44 takes place in the Gulf War,
True.
If we had lost somebody, Billy, do you think that would be exciting or morbid to replay a scenario that you had a personal connection to?
Yeah, thinking about it like that for sure. I mean, you could say that with any war game. You know what I mean? You could talk about Call of Duty World War II if you wanted to. Is that more morbid because you're actually shooting, a pretend gun, and then this game you're just moving little characters around and being tactical and stuff like that? It really, yeah. I mean, I guess it depends. How badly did the conflict affect you? You know what I mean? Did you lose people during that? And so it would be, a shell shock going into a scenario again, whether it be, real or fake. That's incredibly difficult. And again, pretending that we were in something like that, for me, I think it would be pretty difficult, depending on how how things went. Really, that's a incredibly difficult subject to talk about. Especially as soldiers, Marines, and everybody around the world that's ever been in conflict. You can't really describe it unless you actually lived it.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the degree of separation. Something from World War II, probably a lot easier to process and be excited about. Let's pivot to thinking about Memoir 44 as a whole. Billy, where does this game shine for you? What makes Memoir 44 special?
Yeah, so if you've got the right cards in front of you and you've got everything, it's great because it kind of reminds me of chess. You really do have to think a few moves ahead because, like I was saying beforehand, you would hop in and say like, hey, this squad here is going to probably be more beneficial if you move them over here because then they can attack this town and that will leave you with this guy to come move up and move that. So I do like it in the fact that, yeah, it really, really does make you think, what your strategy is going to be next. So I really think that is a cool place where it does shine. If you have the correct cards that you need and your dice rolls are good, that sets it up for a very nice game. If it completely, if you roll poorly and you have bad cards or you can't move your tanks off of a bridge, there you go. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where I think it shines for sure.
And I think one thing that I want to set up just a little bit more, we've been talking a lot about the cards that you draw. They're called command cards, and each scenario dictates how many of those cards that you're drawing. And it's meant to emulate how effectively that side controlled their troops in that battle. If a side was really disorganized or didn't have command or was facing other challenges, you might only draw 4 command cards for that scenario, where your opponent, whose side might have been better prepared, more dug in, more ready for the conflict, might draw 6. And that winds up being a major element in the game. We played one in the last couple of nights where the allies only had 4 cards, and all the units were dug in, and one of the 4 cards that I drew was dig in, which puts sandbags on the map. So that card was effectively worthless for me. So 25% of my combat options was absolutely worthless. So I think that's an interesting element of this game that I hadn't really talked about before, and our printer is randomly speaking at us, which is a little bit freaky.
Yeah.
Phoenix,
Phoenix,
did you think that this game was more strategic or reactionary?
I would be in the boat more reactionary than strategic for me. So.
And why do you say that?
Oh, I guess, I tried at first, when I first played it, I tried to be strategic, like, okay, maybe if I line up these cards and the infantry work very well, then it'll work out perfect. But then all of a sudden you throw down a card and it just blows up my plan. So I've learned to become more reactionary. I'll sort of have an idea, but any card you like could just totally wipe out what I was thinking of doing, So each time I thought I had a plan, things kept changing. So to me, it's more of a reactionary.
So it's fair to say that I ruined everything and I took all the fun out of this game for you?
No.
Well, where does Memoir 44 shine to you, Feeny?
I guess being parents with 2 young kids, I love this game because it's a great 2-player game. I love games that work well with 2 players, and I just love how we can just set it up. I know it may look daunting to people with all the figures and placements, but once you get it set up, you can play it within an hour or less, depending on how things go. So I love how it's a great 2-player game, but also you don't spend like 3 hours trying to play one scenario. You and I can at least play 2 scenarios and be like, oh, great board game night.
Yeah, and it's easy to wrap up and put back in the box. And like this phase of life, realistically, it's usually just you and me for games.
Yeah.
I really like that point. I think where this game shines for me is the simplicity of each turn. Like, so many games are so complicated, so nuanced. We've been playing Tainted Grail, which is an awesome narrative-driven game, and there's a lot that I love about it, but it's also a lot to wrap your head around just to do the basic actions of exploring and interacting with the world. In this game, you play a card, you move your units, you roll your attack dice. Back to you. And like sometimes you're only activating 1 unit. Sometimes you're playing a special card which requires a little bit more thought, a little bit more nuance. But generally speaking, it's very snappy back and forth. And each turn is very simple. I like the terrain a lot. I think we've talked about that. I like how the terrain impacts different units differently and gives you different pieces of an environmental puzzle to think about. And I think the historical background for each scenario is awesome. Just knowing what actually happened in this battle, how it got positioned like this, what both sides were trying to do, and how it actually worked out. And like, generally, the scenarios are stacked towards who really won that in real life.
Yes.
They do an interesting job trying to balance it, so it's not a horrible experience playing as either side. But there are definitely sides where one side has a bit of an advantage, and I like the thought of trying to overcome that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Phoenix, who should play Memoir 44?
Everyone.
Everyone on planet Earth.
Everyone, period.
Why should everyone on planet Earth? I mean, there are people that aren't into combat games, into chucking dice. Like, why do you think that Memoir 44 has such a broad appeal?
Again, just the ease of, being able to play a game in a short amount of time without having to spend hours trying to play a game. Like Tainted Grail, we've spent like 2 or 3 nights just trying to get past the first
stage of the first chapter, and we haven't cleared it yet.
Yeah, and so
and like we're 9-ish hours into that game.
Yeah, so I mean, I think anyone that's looking for a quick game to set up that's 2 players, I think it's a perfect game. So.
Well, what about as a couples game? You have our female perspective on the show. I love this game because I love combat, I love chucking dice, I love moving units. I love all the little elements of this game that make it into a whole. Like, there's a lot of other gamers like me, like Dunham springs to mind, but like, what do you think is the appeal for partners who maybe don't play a lot of board games, potentially playing Memoir 44?
I guess, I know looking at the little figures and trying to figure out where to put them and putting the terrain pieces might be daunting, but once you actually start drawing cards and playing dice, I feel like it's a simple game to bring to the table if you have a partner or a friend that you just want to play a game with, where you roll dice and draw cards. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. I know a lot of people prefer placement games, different things, but I think it's a very easy onboarding game if you can get past the miniatures and placing the hexes.
Do you think that this game is a good starting point to get a partner into board games, somebody who doesn't play a lot of games, or do you think that the war aesthetic might be a turnoff?
Yeah, the war aesthetic might be a turnoff. I mean, to me, I think it's a great onboarding game, but the war might be a little turnoff for people. Sure.
Well, we're going to do an OiO couples night. We're going to invite everyone that's a part of the community and all of their partners to come play Memoir 44 with us. Billy, are you and Michelle in for that or what?
I know I would be for sure. Yes, absolutely. I don't know about the wife, but yeah, that'd be fun though.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can couple you up with Scott, but... Billy, in all seriousness, who do you think Memoir 44 appeals to? Who is the audience for Memoir 44?
I think the audience for Memoir 44 is, I don't know if it would be a good starting place to get somebody into board games in general. But, for people who do like them, like you guys were saying, if you like those roll dice, draw cards games and everything like that, I think you'll love the game. I do think that you guys are absolutely correct. And again, I've only played it a couple of times with you guys, but I 100% could see how daunting it could get adding more players to the game. So for me, I was going with maybe keep it 4 at max. The 2-player aspect of it is very fun, but I think if you get more than that, it's just going to get way too much.
So talking about players for the board game, how was the Normandy for you with the group?
The Normandy, yeah. Okay, so I think this game shines as a 2-player game, okay? I just want to make that abundantly clear. I think this game shines as a 2-player game as it was originally designed. I've played 6-player games, and it's still a lot of fun. The Normandy map that I think that you're specifically referring to is something that they did. They printed a giant floor map that's intended to be played with 6 players.
Okay.
It's the beach of Normandy, and the Allies are trying to move all their units up. The Axis is dug in. The Axis can bring in troops from the back of the map, and it's cool in the fact that it's this big thing, and there's tons of units. The downsides are the setup was backbreaking, even with multiple people who knew how to play the game, knew how to set it up. Just trying to get all of the pieces onto the map of a map that size and scale was excruciating. And then once you're into the game, The turns can get very long as everyone, and especially Casey, gets into the deep think. The Hobbybox hates Memoir 44 because his experience is these grand scale games, and this one in particular, the turns got so long in between when the Axis would go and when the Allies would go that we started playing what's the 4-player game? Towerfall. We started playing Towerfall Ascension on the other team's turn because it was taking so long. We have limited time for gaming in our lives right now to spend an entire day playing that giant map. Rolling the dice is fun. Eliminating enemy units is always fun, but like that particular experience, I would say, is at the bottom of the Memoir experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, watching you guys trying to have a whole bunch of guys play either side, I mean, 4 maybe, but again, I would say it really shines at 2. I mean,
would you have any interest in playing that giant floor map at any point ever?
You and I, or maybe Billy and someone, and Joey and you and I, 4 people with the big floor map because things will move, but So
that sounds like a hard pass. The last scenario in the game is they call it an overlord map. That's where you put 2 base games together, and it's the it's Omaha Beach yeah. spread across 2 boards, which is 6 different panels to activate. Do you see us potentially playing that at some point?
I would like to try that, taking 2 base games, the boards together, and doing the whole Omaha Beach to see how it is trying to command a big board. But it'll be interesting to try it. But.
Yeah. All right. Am I hearing that you hate my friends with a burning fiery passion? Is that the real issue here?
No.
Like Billy's all right, but everyone else?
No. It's just knowing how this game plays, knowing that you can't spend a lot of time thinking about your move because then all of a sudden people get a little bored. You really need to kind of be a little reactionary. So it'd be hard to play with someone that you're kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. So,
and like some people are wired to deep think, and I like to poke at Casey a lot, and I've taken multiple shots at him in this game, and I will continue to do so for the rest of our lives. But like some people are just wired for that very deep think and want to make sure that they're doing the absolute optimized move, whereas I'm more of a grip it and rip it type.
I guess with this game, I'm a grip it, rip it person. So,
well, that is our discussion on Memoir 44, strategic board game that emulates the battles of the European front in World War II. We're going to move on to Tom Awesome's Top 5.
It's time now for... the final countdown! Tom Awesome's Top 5 Countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1...
For our top 5 today, I'm going to kick it over to Billy to rank his top 5 war movies. Billy, what parameters did you use to shape this list?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So, to preface this top 5, we're in all of your episodes when you do a top 5, we joke, we argue, we banter back and forth on this. I wanted to take this in a little bit more serious faction. And then I was having an inner monologue with, like an inner battle with myself on how I should approach this top 5. Because for one, I want to be respectful to the men and the women in the military, past and future and present. I want to also consider accuracy when it comes to war movies. Because there are some, like an Inglourious Basterds movie, where it takes place in World War II, but it's not a specific thing that has happened. It was a made-up Hollywood story, but used American soldiers and German soldiers and whatnot. So this one was one of the tougher top 5s that I've done for you guys. So what I decided to do was I just took your wording and just went with it, which is to rank my top 5 war movies. So on a completely movie, Hollywood, whatever way that you want to take it, just out of respect for the military and around the world, I will take it as that then, as my top 5. These are the movies I really like watching because I just like them as a movie and not because of historical accuracy or characters or anything like that, but just all around great movies. So I hope that's okay with the both of you.
Yeah. Absolutely. They're great parameters. And I think at some point in the future, it'd be interesting to do like a top 5 like most historically accurate
Yeah.
media based on war. I think that'd be really interesting. But for our top 5 today, it's your top 5 war movies. What's number 5, Billy?
So number 5 is Glory, starring Matthew Broderick, Morgan Freeman. It takes place during the Civil War in an all African American unit that Matthew Broderick takes over. You've got the Confederacy that is on a mission to completely wipe out this unit because we all know that the Civil War was based on slavery, and I don't care what anybody else says about that. That's exactly what it was. Fight me. This was a great movie. I watched this a long time ago when I was younger. It's incredibly powerful. And so I put it at number 5, not because it's last, but because it's just one of the great war movies that I think everybody should watch. And there's a good chunk of Civil War movies out there, but I think there could be more for sure. A lot of people tend to focus just on like Vietnam or World War II. But I think if you want a really good start into a good Civil War movie, I think you should pick up Glory for sure. I thought that was a absolutely wonderful movie to start this list off of.
Well, you've sold me. I want to check it out.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that movie. It's like a fantastic Civil War movie. Yeah, I agree with Billy. It's one that everyone should watch, and it's a great war film, great narrative, great characters. An interesting one I watched about the Civil War. I don't know if you've seen. I can't remember the name of it, but Ang Lee. I don't know if I'm butchering his name. He did a Civil War movie with Tobey Maguire and Jewel. It's a very interesting Civil War movie. It's a little long, but it's kind of fascinating. I wish I remember the title, but I agree with you. I wish there was more Civil War movies, being
Is that
made.
Ride with the Devil?
Ride with the Devil, yes. So,
Good memory. So number 5, Glory from the Civil War. Number 4.
Number 4 I put as Black Hawk Down. I thought this was a very well done movie that's, within the last 2 decades of a war going on. This would be the Battle of Mogadishu, where this took place. This focuses on, a lot of the battles, especially the helicopter pilots. I liked this one because if you do some research on this movie, you'll come to find out, and please do forgive me if I get this wrong, any of these things wrong. So Google at your discretion. The pilots for these Blackhawks that landed, stayed back and fought with their units and died in combat because of it. This was based on 2+ characters, I believe, or 2+ real soldiers in real life that actually got the Medals of Honor posthumously. So I thought it was a very well done movie in the fact that it honored them and the rest of the soldiers, and just showed the guerrilla warfare, or the urban guerrilla warfare of these tight towns in Mogadishu that they're fighting in, because urban warfare is completely terrifying. You see forests and jungles of Vietnam or going over to Iwo Jima and stuff like that, and they're fighting on I tell you, the building warfare when you're in an urban setting is absolutely terrifying, and this movie does a really, really good job at displaying that.
This is one you love, right? This is Owen Wilson?
No, this isn't it. But no, I agree with Billy. It's Josh Hartnett's in it. It's a good movie. I went to see it in the theaters, and yeah, the suspense, the characters, the helicopter scenes, everything. It was very well done. And it's a good movie to watch if you haven't seen it. So
number 5, Glory. Number 4, Black Hawk Down. Number 3.
Number 3, 2 and 1 are difficult always, as we know in these top 5. I'm going to go ahead and put Full Metal Jacket at number 3, taking place in the Vietnam War. Really, I think this is one of the movies that gets quoted the most. This is also where we were introduced to one of our favorite drill sergeants ever, played by R. Lee Emery. Always hard to pronounce his name. Rest in peace. Who was an actual drill sergeant, or whatever they're called in the Marine Corps. This was a very twisted look at what basic training and living in the barracks was. This was a hard movie to watch for at times because of the absolute mental gymnastics that these characters go through, especially the private. Oh gosh, why am I missing his name?
Gomer Pyle.
Gomer Pyle goes through with this drill sergeant and the entire unit. I mean, if you remember the scene where they strap him down to the bed and they beat him with soap bars and socks, it's terrifying. You know what I mean? And so, I think a movie like that, it hits hard because it's not just about the war; it's about the mental anguish that some of these people can go through. Because what happens a lot, and still to this day, not with beatings or anything, but if you are punished, the whole unit gets punished. And they really showed that with Gomer Pyle eating the jelly donut on top of the apple box while everybody else is doing push-ups and stuff. So I thought it was a terrifying look at the inside of a barracks and how bad it, quote unquote, could have possibly been back in the day.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. This is the only movie on your top 5 that I've actually seen, so I'll jump in and comment here. I think that the scenes around boot camp are really fascinating. And on the one hand, I understand the need to toughen people up to prepare them for war. Because watching Band of Brothers, you see just the incredible physical feats that are required of these human beings that are going out to kill the enemy. So on the one hand, I understand that you need to push these people. You need to get them uncomfortable. You need to toughen them. You need to weed out the ones that aren't going to make it. But on the other hand, as a human being, seeing some of the things that these people have to go through and trying to put yourself in that position, it's I know that I couldn't hack the military. I just know that I'm not mentally tough enough. I'm not physically strong enough. So I always emphasize with the characters that can't cut it because I know that would be me and I don't want to be in that position.
Yeah. No, it's been so long since I've seen it, but yeah, your guys' points are spot on with that movie. So in Billy's top 5 list of war movies, number 5 is Glory from the Civil War. Number 4 is Black Hawk Down. Number 3 is Full Metal Jacket from the Vietnam War. What's your number 2 movie, Billy?
So for number 2, I've got Platoon. It's got that famous scene with Willem Dafoe getting shot and falling down on his hands and knees screaming, ah! I mean, that's an iconic picture that you can, if you say war movie, Vietnam, people will be like Platoon. It's one of the first movies I watched with my dad. So that's why I put it at the top of my list. It got me really interested in it's the horrors of war. It's the brotherhood that people have with each other, watching their fellow brothers and comrades it's slaughtered in a movie, which is terrifyingly sad. I mean, the infighting of everybody in the units and stuff like that, because it's, like most wars, it's a senseless one. And so you get that internal conflict between people. It's fascinating. And I think Platoon really, really did that well as far as showing those horrors, for sure, when it comes to not getting along with the people because, you both believe at the same time that this is not worth it, but you're stuck there together. Mm-hmm. So yeah, good one for number 2 for me personally.
Yeah, everything Billy said. It's been a long time. Seen it once, but yeah. Yeah,
I've never seen it. Well, Billy, what's your honorable mention for war movies?
I have a few as my honorable mention. So again, I'm going off of your list. I'm going way off of your list, so I apologize because I typically do this. I have honorable mentions: Inglourious Bastards. That was just a great movie to watch because it was fun. Because it was a story that took place in World War II, but nothing ever happened in real life. This was a made-up scenario of a band of people who are going around and they're Nazi hunters led by Brad Pitt. And they've got characters like the Bear Jew and stuff like that. So, it was a Quentin Tarantino movie about World War II and stuff in its own little fashion. But it's, I just thought it was it's just a really fun movie to watch if you just want a foul-mouthed, shoot-'em-up, ragtag group of guys that are killing Nazis. You know what I mean? So that's what I thought for sure for Inglourious Bastards.
Just a real quick aside, we do talk about it quite a bit in our Quentin Tarantino Director show, which was roughly March of 2021. So if you dig back in the OiO podcast feed, you can learn more about our thoughts on Quentin Tarantino, why he falls short for me, and why you love Inglourious Bastards so much.
True. Yes, absolutely. So please do go watch that, or do listen to that show, because that was a fun one that we did as well. Other honorable mentions, I won't get into it too much, but we've got Apocalypse Now, which takes place in Vietnam. Great one. We have Letters from Iwo Jima, directed by
Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood, thank you. Takes place in World War II on the Japanese side.
Yeah.
I appreciate war movies that don't just Americanize everything and we're the heroes of everything. I love seeing other sides of war. So if you haven't seen that, that is a wonderful one to watch. And then finally, I just wanted to throw Braveheart in there too. I know it was based off of a battle that William Wallace was in. It's not historically accurate with these battles in the movie, but as far as war movies goes, this is a war movie. You know what I mean? So if you want a really good, long 3+ hour movie that is, you know, the Scots defending their land against the English, I highly suggest watching Braveheart for those who haven't. So those are my honorable mentions.
So a quick recap of the list. Number 5, Glory. Number 4, Black Hawk Down. Number 3, Full Metal Jacket. Number 2, Platoon. Then what is your number 1 war movie, Billy, and why does it stand out so much to you?
My number 1 war movie for me at my age of 40, and again, this is my list, Saving Private Ryan. That, to me, was the most horrifying, intense opening to any war movie personally that I have ever watched.
And I think the opening is the only part of the movie that I've seen. That is the D-Day invasion, correct?
That is correct. Yes, that is intensely scary, intensely accurate from people and soldiers who were in that conflict. D-Day, the biggest conflict. So incredibly accurate. I've heard that people had to walk out of the theater when it first was introduced because it was so triggering. So to pay homage to the absolute terror and horror of that particular battle, D-Day, was absolutely incredible. So it first pulls you in with that gruesome beginning, and then it goes into the mission that no one wanted to go on to recover Private Ryan, played by Matt Damon, and having Tom Hanks try to do inner battle with his unit, trying to tell them that, hey, like, this is still our mission, whether you like it or not, and trying to bring everybody together while they're all still battling during this stuff. You know what I mean? It was so absolutely well done that the fact that I put this as my number 1 and that we are going to be talking about Band of Brothers, both of this movie and that series, having Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg both collaborate together, I think was incredibly well done. And I'm glad that Band of Brothers did spawn off of this movie because they really took that into the series Band of Brothers, and we'll get into more detail of that later, but this really stuck with me, Saving Private Ryan. I'm sure there's plenty of other movies out there war-wise that I'm sure people would disagree with me on placing this as number 1, but for me, that terror of what it was really like really puts you in there as a civilian. You're like, holy crap, it's terrifying. So that is it for my top 5 of just Billy's favorite war movies. So again, I know we usually banter back and forth on our top 5, so I appreciate you both and our listeners here just kind of giving homage to the soldiers all around and everything.
No, it's a great list. If you want to share your thoughts, you can email the show at overratedpod@gmail.com. That's overratedpod@gmail.com. Hey guys, Phoenix and I were role-playing some Band of Brothers the other day. After we did the Tom Hardy scene, we went outside to act out Breaking Point. Between digging out my foxhole, dropping a deuce in the neighbor's foxhole, falling a tree over my own foxhole, and then dragging Phoenix across the yard, my back is just killing me. Do you know who I could see for help?
Yes, I do. Check out Premier Health. They have solutions for back pain, neck pain, role-playing injuries, and more. We suggest seeing Dr. Camille in Golden Valley, Minnesota. Learn more at premierhealthmn.com.
That's premierhealthmn as in Minnesota.com. Our other main show topic today is Band of Brothers. The HBO series tells the story of Easy Company in the Army's 101st Airborne Division and their missions in World War II Europe, from Operation Overlord to VJ Day. The show spans 10 episodes, and it stars Damian Lewis as Richard Winters, Ron Livingston as Lewis Nixon. Did I get that wrong? Is it Dixon?
Nixon.
Lewis Nixon. Donnie Wahlberg as C. Carwood Lipton, and Neil McDonough as Buck Compton. The show featured 8 directors, including Tom Hanks, and 8 writers. It's based on a book by Stephen Ambrose. Billy, you told me that this is the 40th or 50th time that you've watched the show. That means that over 400 hours of your life has been spent watching Band of Brothers. What keeps bringing you back to this series?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually 40 or 50 times. I thought I was exaggerating, and then going back and watch it again for this show, I'm like, I do think I watched it so many times since it came out. I can't get over how much you fall in love with the characters. This entire series really does a phenomenal job at investing you in these people, these soldiers, these real soldiers. And you feel for them. You want to know their story. You want to know their background. You want to know why they get along with this fellow soldier or not. You want to see them succeed. You hate it when they die or they get injured. It's so well written. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the directors, Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, everybody, they actually put all of these actors into their own boot camp over in Europe, if I remember. I think it was in England. I can't remember. It was like some place off of an airfield where they actually all got to get together and do weeks of their own boot camp, and they would separate certain people and their characters in real life. So these people would have this brotherhood that they went through all of this together, and then they would introduce somebody else in here and introduce. So you actually feel it from the actors when there's like friction, and it's just so well done. I could go on, but that is 100% what it brings me back, is just loving these characters so much.
Well, that's fascinating to me. Like, I really enjoyed the show, but I can't see myself rewatching it multiple times. Thinking about how well this show is set up, it's over 20 years old, and watching Band of Brothers today, Phoenix, how well do the cinematography, set design, and effects still hold up?
For me, it still holds up. I mean, the everything holds up. The terrain, the CG effects, different things. I think it is a great show to watch, and you feel like you're still immersed in what they're dealing with. And I think that's kudos to the directors and the actors, because it still feels real coming off the screen. So I think it's a very well done show that I think will still stand the test of time 20 years from now.
And can you think of a couple of examples of scenes that were particularly stunning or visually interesting for you?
A Bastogne being dug in the trees, the exploding around them. I mean, it's just, you really felt the whole explosions coming down and the trees falling on them and what they're having to run and hide from. That scene's very filmed really incredibly. And as far as a historical standpoint, that one shot of all the planes and the boats all heading towards D-Day, it kind of hits you to see how massive that campaign was to try to turn the tide of the war. So,
yeah, I agree. And like that scene of all the planes and boats, like that is one thing that has really stuck with me from the show. Billy, how well do you feel the show holds up?
I think it'll always hold up for sure. If you watch like Bastogne and then Breaking Point, the 2 episodes back to back, you'll see just how absolutely like terrifying and beautiful the cinematography and the practical effects in this show were. We rely so heavily on this in modern movies, which is CGI, and then you don't really get a lot of practical effects. This show really did a great job at practical effects, making it absolutely terrifying and really drawing you in for sure.
I love that you brought up the 2 episodes that take place in Bastogne, because I think they're fascinating both from a narrative standpoint, but also from a technical standpoint. How do you think they captured all that outdoor cinematography? Like, how do they capture the troops out in their foxholes? Do you think that was actually filmed outdoors, or do you have any idea how they actually accomplished that?
I don't know the the specifics on how they filmed it. But man, did they sell it. No matter how they did it, they sold it. You felt cold. You felt the shivering, unequipped soldiers that were in half-dug foxholes or, freezing. You could tell because they were completely unarmed. I say unarmed they weren't fully ready for this battle, for the weather, the ammunition, for the food, anything. You know what I mean? This was a absolutely terrifying battle. And there's a quote at the end of, I think it's the end of the breaking point where, and I don't have it right in front of me, so I'll butcher this, but it's basically saying no man that was in Bastogne did not come out unscathed, whether they were injured or not. So that kind of just gives you a little bit of the scariness of how that battle itself was. And I really think they did a great job. And yeah, what Phoenix was saying, the exploding trees, holy crap, that was scary. Oh my gosh. Like, it still is to this day. I watched those 2 episodes last night, and it's still just like, you're in awe watching this. Mark Wahlberg's character describes it as remembering when he was young with his brother watching the 4th of July fireworks, how it's an awesome display. And I love how you use the word awesome, because you think awesome, radical, but awesome is like awe-inspiring. You know what I mean? How terrifying it is. So, yeah, holy crap, this show still holds up to this day. Because, yeah, I was thinking that last night, So, yeah, absolutely.
I would never have guessed that this show is 20 plus years old. When a lot of people get injured, I thought the injuries looked really good and convincing. All the explosions looked awesome. And I agree that it holds up incredibly well. Mm-hmm. Well, how well does the show balance historical accuracy with weaving an engaging narrative?
Sure, absolutely. If you watch interviews, if you hop on YouTube, you can find a lot of interviews with the actors that portrayed these actual soldiers in Easy Company. And with the major characters, they all got to, if they were still alive at the time, got to actually speak with them over the phone and learn about them, learn their day-to-days, learn how they were in the past, learn how they were in the war and everything. And you could tell from these interviews with these actors and everything that they really, really took this seriously. Like, after speaking with them, like, you could feel their passion and wanting to absolutely represent these soldiers in this. And so I think the historical accuracy of this entire unit of Easy Company, going through what they did, I think they did a bang up job on it. I really do. Now, as far as engaging narrative, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that Hollywood threw in there just for moving the story forward's sake. But as far as the characters, who they are as a person, how they hold themselves, how they walk, how they talk, that was absolutely accurate. The terrifyingness of war, 100%. So yeah, I got to give this movie aces for what it did as far as historical accuracy and also keeping an engaging narrative while still holding true the actual soldiers that were in this.
I mean, I agree with Billy completely. On a whole, the narrative, the soldiers, the characters, it engages you and pulls you through the whole miniseries. And to be nitpicky, there's, some ebbs and flows with some of the storyline, some little weaker points and stuff, but I guess as a general whole, it was very captivating. For me, it would have been nice to have, for a historical standpoint, at the beginning of each episode, to just have a recap of, from the last episode to the next episode, what happened in between, because there's a lot of time jumps. So it'd been kind of nice to have a little bit of a historical description. So it's like, oh, okay, I can place this in my head, where it is.
So you wanted a Star Wars scroll for each episode.
Yeah, a Star Wars scroll, just give me a little update here. So, but it was just, because in my head I'm trying to, they give you the date, but I'm trying to, what little I remember of the whole timeline, is I was trying to figure it out in my head, but then all of a sudden this episode starts and I start getting engaged. But that's just me. It would have been nice to have a little bit of historical, context at the beginning of each episode.
Yeah, and I'm an idiot about world history, so I can't comment on the accuracy, but I thought the narrative was really good. And one of the things that I really appreciated about the show is how they weaved the individual stories of all the different soldiers throughout the different episodes. Like Donnie Wahlberg's character, Lipton, he was the center of one episode. The medic was the center of another episode. Sometimes it followed Winters around. And they did a really good job of surfacing all of the main characters and giving them each an episode or some period to shine.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I fell in love with Winters, and it's like when it moved on to other characters, I'm like, no, bring back Winters. I want to follow him. But, watching a second time, it is nice to be able to touch base with each character, see a perspective of the war from the different characters and what went through, even though I had to let go of Winters. Come back. But,
Did you still feel the same appeal to Winters now? Because it had been a decade or more in between when you watched the show, right?
Yeah. I still love his character, but I knew it was coming, so I was prepared to say bye-bye. I'll see you towards the end. But, it wasn't as harsh of a transition as the first time.
Well, throughout the show, you follow Easy Company's on their journey from boot camp through several stops on the front all the way to the Eagle's Nest. Phoenix, what stood out to you about Easy Company's overall journey?
How much they were relied on as a unit, how much the not knowing military and how the hierarchy, what you call each, you have battalions, you have units, but it seemed like they were always thrown against and utilized a lot in the battles. I mean, they're paratroopers, and
they did remarkably little jumping out of planes for paratroopers.
As far as we could tell from the episodes, they may have done more than we're aware of, but it's just like they were paratroopers who were supposed to jump out of planes and fight, but they were used on the ground continuously, and they were went to hell and back. They just were used over and over and over again with no break, it seemed like. So
yeah, I thought that was fascinating as well. And Billy, what are a couple of moments that stand out from Easy Company's journey, or a couple of your favorite episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go a little bit off of our show notes here, just now thinking about your question here. It is nice to see. It's great to see as far as a narrative, like from boot camp all the way to the Eagle's Nest. That's really cool to see, because you do go with them on this journey of growth as a soldier and growth as a human and growth as a unit and growth as brotherhood and everything. I thought that was really well done. You know what I mean? Like you felt their anger towards, their commanding officers in boot camp, and then seeing him later, played by David Schwimmer, how much they hated him, but how much their hate of him and their love for Winters, like you could see the brotherhood right away, like in excuse me, and I don't think it's Curry, I'm not sure which episode, it's 1 or 2, but where like all the non-commissioned officers all get together and say that they want to leave unless he is dismissed from their unit and Winters is brought back, and that they were, afraid to be court-martialed and stuff like that. I thought that was a really cool thing to see, because you got to start to see like they're all in it together. They want a good leader. Winters was that good leader. And then when you go on in the show, a lot what Phoenix was saying of like missing Winters, you do feel that, because you see him rise in ranks, going from a non-commissioned officer to a commissioned officer, which means he's pulled off the battlefield and he's commanding more people, and he's away from his like core group of men. Really see progression a lot from these guys. You know what I mean? You see them coming back from the hospital after being injured, and you see guys that, leave the hospital before they're, fixed up to be back with the men, and like how the dynamic changes between if you stayed in the, the one guy that stayed in the hospital for the whole entire Battle of Bastogne and then came back, and how he was treated. It's like, oh, well, Popeye over there, he got himself out of the hospital right away and was with us the entire time in Bastogne. So I hope that, you had a nice, comfy, warm bed to sleep in. So you get to see it all through the entire thing. So it's a wonderful journey that this entire series did with these men.
You bring up a couple of awesome points there. Let's go back to Winters for 1 second. You see him rise through the ranks. Phoenix, there's a scene that you love with Winters late in the episode. It's I believe it's Breaking Point. It's in I think it's in Bastogne. The Allies are going on the offensive, and there's an incompetent commander leading Easy Company. It drives Winters crazy. How does he handle that situation?
Through the whole episode, Breaking Point, you see Winters. You know he wants to be with his men and lead them, but he knows he can't, but he's trying to figure out a leader to lead them. And the leader they have at that point keeps disappearing. He can't make a decision.
He's a well-connected person that got thrust into this leadership role that he wasn't qualified for.
Yeah. And so Breaking Point really shows the different type of leaders that come into war or to the military. You have Winters, who rose up naturally because of his mind, his brilliantness, the way to lead men. And then you have this guy who comes in because of his connections, but he can't make a decision. He disappears. And so you have this Sergeant Lipton who's trying to keep the men together because he knows they have this weak point of a leader who's kind of breaking the men apart. So it's a very fascinating episode to watch Lipton trying to glue these men back together to keep them together and not cause dissonance in the group. But then when it came to the Battle of Foy, Winters knew because of this weak leader, he tried to tell him, this is the plan. Follow the plan. It's simple. Just do this. Don't worry about anything else. Just do this.
And then the battle comes, the commander walks into it, he crumbles, he absolutely folds, and the mission starts to fall apart. How does Winters react?
He's screaming from the force line, saying, keep going, and nothing's happening. His men are getting shot at, everyone's confused. So he tries to run out, but is it the general? I can't remember.
Colonel, I think, Colonel Sink.
He says, you can't go, stay here. And so Winters had to stay. And then his split decision was to call Spears.
He had been debating who to put in command of this unit, and Spears was one contender for it, but he was potentially a Nazi murderer. Like, there were some things that happened earlier in the show that cast doubt on his character.
Yep.
And in this split-second decision, Winters appoints him, and you see him spring into action. And it's one of my favorite moments from the entire show. I like seeing him go sprinting into the battlefield, pick up the pieces, keep sprinting, and just like how he galvanized everyone, took a terrible situation and was able to salvage it just by taking decisive action.
And so I think it's a great episode showing leadership. You have Winters, who made a split decision that saved the men, Spears being the perfect decision to lead the men, and Lipton, his journey of trying to keep the men together. So I think it's a great episode, but I do love that moment where Winters wants to dive in and lead his men, but then he can't.
That's such a great scene.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't agree with you guys more. That is such. I watched that last night, so it's like burned in my head. Just the emotion behind it, and I agreed with Winters being like, God damn it, excuse for the swear, runs out into the battlefield, and Clink is like, get your back here, you're not it, and he's starting to reprimand him as he's running back, and Winters just turns and just yells, Spears, get your to the front line, and sends him in to relieve the other guy. Oh my God. Yeah, that is such a great one. And that goes back to what I was saying about you get to see Winters' journey and the fact that he can't be there for his men with them. You know what I mean? He has to take control from the very back. And so he just feels so powerless at the same time. But he's in this, I don't think he's a major at that point yet, was he? It might have been captain still. I can't remember in that battle if he got the oak leaves and turned into a major after that or during that. But regardless, he's a higher ranking officer and he can't go save everybody. You know what I mean? So I totally agree with you both. That is such such an incredible scene for sure for Winters.
Billy, you also brought up units coming back into Easy Company. There's a recurring theme of replacements because lots of people die and new soldiers have to be integrated in as well as injured soldiers coming back. I thought that the Crossroads episodes was interesting because you had replacements rolling in, including Charles Xavier himself. There's an interesting scene before they go into this battle at the Crossroads where a soldier who didn't fight on D-Day had a pin on his uniform that was given to all the soldiers from Normandy. And there was a confrontation from another soldier who was a part of Easy Company, wouldn't let him wear the pin, made a big deal about it, and then that replacement soldier winds up dying in the very next battle. I just thought that was the recurring theme of replacements coming in was really interesting to me, and Crossroads stuck with me because it was a hard situation to walk into, because you had the core group that was trained together and very tight and been together, and then you have these new soldiers coming in trying to contribute, and it was just a disastrous situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think they handled it excellently, perfectly, because they had to show the battle-hardened soldiers versus the bright and shiny new replacements coming in, and the juxtaposition of the viewpoint. And Crossroads does an excellent job of showing that, but to me, the strongest one of that viewpoint was Why We Fight. I believe it was that episode where I can't remember the character, he's walking out with a new replacement, and they get to the point where they're supposed to watch. It's like a checkpoint. They have the artillery gun. And he sits down to read a book, and the newbie is like, I can't wait to fight something. He's looking, he's using binoculars. He's just so ramped up. He's humming
a tune as he checks the machine gun.
He's happy because he's in the war. He wants to kill a German. And the veteran who has lived through Bastogne and Foy, he couldn't take it anymore. He's like, look, I'm just happy to sit here in the sun, have a hot shower every day, a hot meal. This is the most content I've ever been, easy day for me. It was a great scene showing how they were continuously having to bring in new people, new replacements, and their viewpoint versus the veterans who have lived through Bastogne and different battles. And so that to me was the clearest scene. So.
And you mentioned Why We Fight. That is viewed as the top-rated episode. Billy, what are your thoughts on the overall Why We Fight, and why do you think that episode resonates with people so strongly?
Oh gosh, yeah, Why We Fight. I mean, that shows you that's the episode where you see the 300,000 retreating and surrendering German soldiers walking away. You get Webster, who starts screaming from the back of the truck, why the F are we here? Why the F did you do this? Why did you start all of this? This is all for nothing. You can see the emotions. They were all such, that they were seeing the atrocities of war the entire time. And there's all of these episodes that we watched. They were going through all of this stuff. And then they just see all of these German soldiers just walking away. And you could see them all starting to break down. And why? What was the point of all of this? What was the point of all of this? This is also the first episode that we ever are introduced ever in this entire series to concentration camps. And they really, really, really showed how absolutely horrifying that must have been for them to first discover.
Well, I thought that was a fascinating scene, and Phoenix had to put it into context for me, because you start out with a scouting party out in the woods, and they stumble across something, and a runner comes back, and he's trying to find a commanding officer, and he finds Winters, and he's like, we found something. And Winters like, what did you find? Yeah. He's like, I don't know. And so I was like, well, what the hell? And so then Winters comes out, and you see the concentration camp, and now today in 2024, we know what a concentration camp is. We know how awful it was, and it's like, oh god. But putting yourself in that time and place, a time without cell phones, internets, pictures, it's like, oh my god, how do you explain what a concentration camp is when you just stumble across it? And then watching how the Allies tried to help these people, and then having medical advice where you couldn't give them food because they would eat themselves to death, and trying to tell them to get back into the camp. As an overall episode, I thought maybe this was one of the weaker narrative structures, but the power of the concentration camp, I think, is what vaults this to the top of everyone's list.
Yeah, I can see why, because they kept it secret so well that I don't really know. I don't think a lot of countries actually knew about these camps because they hid it so well, and none of the information leaked out as So people had no idea what they were stumbling upon.
And in the wrap up at the end of the show, they did say that 11 million people, I think 5 million ethnic minorities and 6 million Jewish people were murdered in these camps. Yeah. And it's like, that is a staggering number to try to wrap your head around. And to think that that was a secret from the world and these troopers just stumbled across it. It's a fascinating thing to think about.
Yeah, and I think I remember Hart talking about the Russians as they pushed through. They found the biggest and the worst one in Poland, and I think they found it first before the Americans found theirs. I can't remember the timeline, but yeah, the Allies, once they found them, they're going back and forth, trying to figure out what this is and trying to piece together why are these people here, trying to figure out answers to these concentration camps. So it's...
And that scene with Liebgott,
yeah,
translating in German to one of the men that were in the concentration camp. That was a powerful scene.
Yes.
Because they were trying to figure out, why are you here? Like, are you criminals? Like, what's going on here? What is this place? Is it a work camp? Like, you're watching them figure out what this place is in real time, and it's really terrifying, man. Like, they did that scene, like, as atrocious as that act was back then.
Yeah.
It was like, so like Tom, what you were saying, like, it didn't really need a narrative because like those scenes really did speak for themselves. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's terrifying.
It's, the narrative about the concentration camps, but another scene that they did well to hit home was, why did the town not know about it? They had to know about it. And then the colonel made the town's people come and bury the people, and that scene was hits you hard too, watching these Germans and women in high heel shoes and skirts trying to carry these dead bodies and bury them. And so I could see why it's ranked really high, because it is very impactful and it hits you in the gut with some of the scenes. So
yeah, and there's something that they reference later in the show. They're rolling into Austria when they're taking Eagle's Nest, and they say, well, this is the one town where people can't deny that they're Nazis, because like, you literally have to be a Nazi to live here. And I wonder, I think that's another fascinating thing to think about, is like, how many Nazis or Nazi supporters were there in these towns that they were working through Germany and that just got off the hook because they said, oh no, I'm not a Nazi, no, I don't know anything about it, no, is it? Mm-hmm. So I think what a fascinating like time period and experience to live through.
Mm-hmm.
Billy, were there any other specific episodes that you wanted to touch on before we talked about some of the characters that spoke to us?
We could talk for hours on all of these episodes because they're all great in their own minds and stuff like that. So no, I think the ones that we covered are really good ones. If anybody wants to jump into an episode, I don't know why you would, but I think you should definitely check this series out from beginning to end for sure.
Agreed. Well, Billy, this is one of your favorite shows. You've watched it countless times. Well, who are some of your favorite characters and why do they speak to you?
Throughout the watchings, you go through different characters that, if you watch this multiple times, you go through different characters that you really latch on to and that you appreciate their story and you really like their story a lot. For me, though, that stuck out from everyone. I was a toss-up between Eugene Rowe, who was the medic in the episode of Bastogne, brain fart. The medic. Holy cow! What an incredible like character to jump onto in such a horrific battle, because they're not fighting; they're saving people who are just getting blown to bits and just these terrible things. I mean, his character was it showed just the you don't have to be firing a rifle to be affected by this this war. Seeing fellow soldiers get killed off, him just trying to find a pair of scissors was just like a great dichotomy of like, this is how unprepared these people were. The medic couldn't find a pair of scissors, you know what I mean? Like, and so his journey throughout that, and then meeting the woman back at the makeshift hospital in the church back in town and having her die, and he finds her headbands and uses that as a dressing because that's what she would have done. So there's all points to that. But in the cinematography with Eugene, just in like the dead silence of winter, just huddled by himself, just listening, and you can just hear like the distant pops and bangs of war in the background. and then you just hear the faint scream of medic, and he just boom, and he just books into it. I don't know what it was. That's just really cool. I just thought Eugene's character was fantastic. And then you get your next episode after that where they focus on Carwood Lipton, played by Donnie Wahlberg.
And real quick before we get into Lipton, Phoenix, I know that you also have an affinity for Eugene. What makes that character stand out for you?
This time around, I really glommed on to Medic. You see him in, I think he shows up in the second episode, but he's in every episode except for the training camp, I believe, episode. But like what Billy says, being a soldier on the front line, pushing yourself forward, sneaking through, shooting, having to kill someone, that's hard enough. I can't imagine being a medic and not getting discouraged right away, because you have to run out, even if it's at the front line, to try to save someone. And those soldiers who are injured or dying, they desperately are begging you to save them, and you're doing what you can. And I can't imagine losing a man after man after man and not feeling like, what good am I doing? It's just, you kind of have to put it out of your mind. And in that episode, Bastogne, he starts to feel discouraged, I think, a little bit, but towards the end of the episode, he jumps back in, full force. But like, it's just, I can't imagine trying to save a man's life, trying to repair a leg or dig in their body to figure out where stuff is.
Yeah, grab the shrapnel out or whatever.
Yes.
And like, oh,
your hands are dirty, you're sticking your hands in, and I don't know how many bodies a day these medics had to jump from man to man to get them out, carry them out. They can't defend themselves, so you kind of have to run in, not caring that there's bullets coming at you. You can't fire. You have to just get to the man, pull them out, try to save their lives. And it just, personally, I would just crumble after a while, because it's like you're around death constantly. But
do you think that Bastogne was your favorite episode because it followed the medic?
Right now, Bastogne is probably my favorite episode. Just his character, you got to actually see what a medic has to deal with, and especially with that battle that Billy was talking about, the scissors, morphine. I mean, they need morphine to try to help these men not feel a lot, and they couldn't find morphine, and it was hard to get it. So he was working with so little, and he was able to try to save some of the men. But the thing that I found was interesting is he always seemed to be an outsider with these men, even though he was running in, and the first thing they call when they get injured is medic. But he didn't train with him. He wasn't in training camp, boot camp with him. He was placed with their unit, and he was always sitting on the outside, listening to their conversations. A couple of men would engage him and talk to him, but he had his own foxhole. He was kind of, to me, it made him seem like an outsider to this group, even though he was with them the whole time, through this whole thing. So it was a very fascinating character episode, and I really enjoyed it. So,
yeah, it was a good one. Then, Billy, the next episode was Turning Point?
Breaking Point.
Breaking Point. Thank you, Phoenix. And it follows Carwood Lipton. Why does that episode and that character speak to you so much?
Carwood Lipton as a character, because you get to see him just naturally rise up as a leader. He doesn't, he's not gunning for leadership. He's not gunning for the medal. He's not gunning for the rank. That it goes to show throughout that entire episode, because they have an incompetent leader, and we spoke of this earlier. At that point, they have an incompetent leader that's just going, okay, get it done, and then he just walks away. And so Lipton takes over, and this goes on and on and on, and I won't berate on this subject for too long, but the scene in the church at the end of the Battle of Foy, when they're sitting and Spears is talking with them, and he's going, well, the platoon is, leadership has told us that, they've always had a guy that's with them this entire time. He's always been a natural leader. He's took these men and brought them to victory. And, Lipton's just kind of nodding his head and stuff. And Spears goes, you have absolutely no idea who I'm talking about, right? And it's you, And so it's a really cool thing to see, just, a guy, he's just looking out for his men and doing everything that he can and taking over when they need a leader, but he wasn't doing it for that reason. He was doing it because of the brotherhood and just, wanting to protect his men and his fellow brothers, and so I thought that was a really fun story to watch. And again, his narrative throughout the battles of, the shells ringing overhead and stuff like that. So I just thought, thought he was a good character too, but if I had to choose between the two, Eugene Rowe, the medic, would be my favorite for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I like Lipton too. He's, say a top 5 list of characters, but yeah, I agree with what Billy said about Lipton.
My favorite character was actually Malarkey, and it's not because he goes on to be a part of the Orville. But I think that
Malarkey is great.
I think that Malarkey has such an interesting character arc, because when he joins up, he's the Joker in the group, and of course he's the clown and the wild one, the one that's always stirring the pot. It's I always resonate. It's if I had a D&D character set in boot camp for World War II, it would be freaking Malarkey. But throughout the entire campaign, he grows, he becomes a platoon leader, even though he's not crazy about it. And there's a scene where somebody comes in and they share what's supposed to be confidential information, and Malarkey just shouts it out to everybody so that everyone's on the same footing. And I think that Malarkey was interesting just because he had such a wide-ranging arc. He went from that Joker to a more serious soldier as he went through all of these battles. And I just thought that his journey was really interesting.
It is a very interesting journey. And that one scene, the episode, I can't remember the name of it, but, he doesn't seem downtrodden until that episode, or they're in that town. They have to cross the river. But, yeah, he has quite the journey himself. And so it is fascinating to see him progress in the background and not being forefront, say Winters is, or Lipton at times. So,
yeah, that episode's called The Last Patrol.
The Last Patrol.
That you're talking of, Phoenix. Yep, and that's a very pivotal one for Malarkey as well, Tom. So yeah, I agree with that for sure.
And I have to say, another great scene with Winters. The colonel told him, "Hey, you got us some prisoners. Go again." Winters okay. And then he goes down there and says, "I want you guys to go to bed, sleep, and we'll tell the colonel we couldn't get any prisoners." So he went against the orders to protect his men. And it's a fun, great scene again of Winters trying to help and protect his men. So
yeah, you love you some Winters.
I do. I love Winters. I loved watching his stuff. And when I love a character, I dive deep into the actor's other stuff. So I really fell in love with Damian Lewis. So I've tried to watch a lot of his stuff that was out at that time. And Shakespeare Retold. Much About Nothing. He's great in that.
Yeah.
And Life. That's a good show. It's too bad it got canceled. But I haven't seen Homeland. I know a lot of great things about Homeland with him in it. So.
He's also very good in the show Billions as well.
Oh, yeah. I forgot he was in that one as well. So.
Well, he already has a boyfriend. Why are Nixon and Winters always together in the show? They are attached at the hip from the very first episode. Why are those two characters rising through the ranks at the same rate?
I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know if Billy does, but it is interesting about Nixon how he admits he never once fired his gun, and it's amazing that he went through the whole thing without firing, which is kind of fascinating to think about. So
yeah. Well, Feeney, who should watch Band of Brothers?
I think everyone. Period. Everyone, to just get a sense of what World War II was like if you have not watched anything. I think Band of Brothers is a great starting point to, watch a group of soldiers go through from D-Day to, what did they call it? E? Is it?
VE and VJ.
Yeah. A day.
VE Day.
Yeah. And, Saving Private Ryan's a great one, but, with that whole opening scene, I don't know which one is better, Band of Brothers versus Saving Private Ryan, but it's a great starting point, I think, for anyone to learn about World War II.
So if we're in an election year right now, something's going to happen in November. So whichever candidate wins, you are in favor of them making everyone sit down and watch 10 consecutive hours of Band of Brothers as an executive order. That's what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah. Everyone needs to know who we fought. It's really hard to hear that a lot of young people thought we fought Russia in World War II, and it's really? How are you getting this piece of information? But yeah, yes, everyone, mandatory, sit down, watch this so you understand who we fought and why we fought.
Billy, who should watch Band of Brothers?
Everyone. If you like bang, bang, shoot 'em up movies, watch it. If you like historical accuracy, watch it. If you like war movies, watch it. If you like Brotherhood, watch it. I think it's an all-around great series that everybody actually would enjoy.
What if you really like reality TV, Billy?
You should go walk in a lake.
What if you are a successful chiropractor who performs the Logan technique 1,000 times a day?
I don't think he...
We have what we could say about that specific chiropractor, but we'll keep it PG on this show.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. So wrapping up our show on World War II, Memoir 44 and Band of Brothers, what is the educational value of Memoir 44 and Band of Brothers? These two topics, what value do they hold in educating people about World War II? How well does each medium contribute to shaping perceptions of World War II and the sacrifices of those who served?
I mean, the game Memoir 44, you get a taste of, or a tiny bit of historical background with the description before you play. Again, it's just black and white in ways, just strategic, sort of, this is the Axis, this is the Allies, now fight. Where I think Band of Brothers is the most important because you have the human interest, you have the historical background more in depth. So I would say Band of Brothers, hands down, anyone should really, to learn about something, learn about World War II, learn about soldiers, the brotherhood of it, watch it. Memoir, if you really enjoy World War II, play it. You know, if you like anything historical, play it. So,
I think looking at both of these pieces of media together, they help to show the human element of warfare. As a gamer, it's easy to push all of the pieces in. If one of your units gets dinged, it's no big deal. You still have firepower to eliminate your enemy. Thinking of it in human terms after watching Band of Brothers, like, that's human beings. It could be someone you know. Band of Brothers really gave me a healthy distaste for war, and just like seeing and gaining some kind of comprehension of what these soldiers went through. Like, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, literally anyone on planet Earth. It's so I think it's really interesting. It helped open my eyes to just how awful warfare is.
Yeah, I think with Memoir 44, if you like battle tactics and like how wars in the past were set up between the two sides, you'd like it, because then you can also read about it in the little book that they give you and how to set it up. So in that sense, sure, if you like that kind of specific thing of just specifically battles, absolutely. Band of Brothers, though, I mean, you go in as a civilian watching that show and you can still absolutely appreciate the sacrifice that these people made during war, and the accuracy of how terrible war is, you know? So I got to give it to Band of Brothers on this one between the two.
I agree, and Band of Brothers just helped me see things that we take for granted every day. Shower, toilets, more showers, warm beds. It's like, you know, it's just interesting to think about how posh that we have it. Phoenix, how have these mediums influenced your understanding of World War II?
They've helped enhance it. It helped reaffirm a lot of that I've learned. I mean, I think Band of Brothers is a perfect thing to watch to get a starting point, but to get a whole aspect, if you're going to consume media, I feel like you really need to watch, like Billy talked about, Letters to Iwo Jima to get a Japanese perspective in the Pacific. Watch a German film, you know, to get their perspective. Watch a Russian film, you know, watch a British film, you know, because a lot of our stuff, we have American standpoint of how we got into the war and how we fought the war. It's always good to try to get other countries' perspective too in their journey in this war.
And I agree. And like everything that we consume that's American media is like made to make a profit in America. So it is a lot of white people fighting a lot of white people.
Yep.
And so I think it's really important to get some of those diverse perspectives. What are a couple of your favorite shows from outside of our influence here in America?
Well, I guess I had you pause the TV when we were watching I think it was maybe the first episode, but you know, when the Band of Brothers was in England and they were at the place, the
air base.
The air base, thank you. You know, I remember an episode from Foyle's War where these engineers from America came in and they go up to this farmer and say, "This is our land now." And the farmer's like this, but they give him the order. And this whole episode deals about the Americans and the British because they took this guy who's owned this land for
100 years.
100 years, and They basically have to tar it, drain his swamps, destroy his whole farmland, put in bathrooms, do everything to create this airbase. And this farmer he does not like the Americans because they took his land. He believes they were the invaders. So it was kind of interesting seeing that perspective and understanding like, oh, yeah, what happens to that land once they leave? He can't really get his farm back after, So a lot of the sacrifice that was made during the war was interesting.
And you made the point that the British don't tend to like us because they don't tend to view us favorably because we came late to the war, essentially calling us the Lannisters of World War II.
I would go that far, but yeah, no, the British, we were late for the first one, and then we were late for the second one. So we would think the British view us favorably, but a lot of British at that time did not view us very favorably because we took a long time entering this war.
Yeah, so read books, get a broader perspective.
Yes, read books, watch a lot of media from different perspectives.
Well, that's going to do it for our World War II themed show on Memoir 44 and Band of Brothers. Next month, Brian, Phoenix, and I are diving deep into the jungle as we discuss Michael Crichton's book Congo and the board game Lost Ruins of Arnak by Czech Games Edition. Phoenix, you excited for this? You never read Congo back in the day.
No, I haven't read Congo.
You love Michael Crichton, though.
I do. I like his works.
You just reread Jurassic Park.
I know. Such a good book. Can we switch to Jurassic Park?
Absolutely not. I'm dug in again.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to finally read the book and see what I think of it. So
yeah, and I know the board game Lost Ruins of Arnak is well regarded. I loved Czech Games Edition, other game that we reviewed on the show, Sanctum, in our Diablo episode. So I'm excited to dive into the jungle.
Yep.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Outside is Overrated. Please review us on your favorite podcast platform and consider supporting our show on Patreon at patreon.com/OiO. For Phoenix at Phoenix Sadlogic OiO on Instagram, and for Billy at Not on the Internet, I'm Tom Sadlogic at Tom Sadlogic OiO. We'll talk to you next month. Stay inside, kids.
Bye.